So we're going to introduce our luncheon speaker, who also is our very wonderful and illustrious Dan Seeger, who is our president-elect from Pennswood Village in Newtown, Pennsylvania. And he's going to take office tomorrow at the conclusion of the annual meeting on the 12th of April, and he has asked that he might introduce himself to you. Dan started off with NaCCRA as our secretary, and he was a phenomenal secretary, so I was reluctant to say, yes, you can, that's a good thought to be president-elect, but he is absolutely wonderful, and Jack is a superior secretary as well. So, but I wanted you to meet and listen to and ask questions, if you have any, of Dan Seeger, our president-elect.
Thank you, Ruth. Ruth is going to be a very hard act to follow, but I'll do my best. My friends, you and I, and everyone who is a resident in a continuing care retirement community are pioneers in a magnificent social experiment. I say pioneers because, after all, we are participating in a type of institution which had its first significant appearance in the 1970s and 1980s. So we are talking about approximately 40 years, which is but the blink of an eye in the historic scheme of things. For it was in the 1970s and 80s that, in the pioneering spirit for which America is known, older people began banding together to establish communities of mutual support with comfortable and flexible housing options, a coordinated system of services and amenities, and a program of care which addresses the health and wellness needs of residents as they age. Now, I know that some of your communities have histories which go back 100 years. But before the 1970s, these earlier versions of our communities were often established to care for the widowed spouses of clergymen, and were funded by contributions from the larger denomination outside of the life care communities themselves. It was in the 1970s and 1980s that the concept took hold of life care communities fully funded by the entrance fees and monthly fees of the residents themselves. But one of the legacies of that early history is a pattern of governance throughout the industry which assumes that residents are the passive recipients of charity rather than that they are financial investors, resident financiers in their community, investors to whom the management owes some accountability, investors who have both a right and a responsibility to ensure the good order of the community's operation and of its financial affairs. A CCRC, after all, is a sophisticated and complicated business. It is, first and foremost, at least in the instance of the Type A community, a mini insurance company which must accumulate capital to meet residents' needs, the costs of which typically escalate many years after their arrival. But they are unlike typical insurance companies in several key respects. The pool of policyholders is relatively small, leading to statistical uncertainties. And in addition to managing an insurance scheme, large investments need to be made in real estate, in buildings and equipment dedicated to a variety of uses, and supervision needs to be provided for everything from landscaping to dining services to skilled nursing. As you've heard earlier, today it is estimated that there are roughly 1,900 CCRCs in the 50 states and about 600,000 residents enrolled in them. We residents are engaged in and are supporting with our dollars a new industry which is highly complex in nature, which, as long as it works well, fills a vital need, but which in many respects is still being invented, with new contracts, new arrangements, acquisitions, and consolidations occurring every day. All the while, the industry faces a variety of challenges. So I was not exaggerating or merely being colorful when I said at the beginning that we are pioneers. Things ran relatively smoothly in this pioneering field until the late 1990s and early 2000s, when in some areas of the country, waiting lists were replaced by vacancy rates, indicating an oversupply. The financial downturn of 2008 exacerbated the problems, putting the industry as a whole under some stress. And as managements undertook various strategies, some wise and some not so wise, to address the situation, the need for residents to adapt to change and to adopt some creative role in planning for their own future was highlighted. The fundamental premise upon which NaCCRA is based is simply this: it behooves pioneers to engage in a process of collective learning. Pioneers will never thrive if they remain isolated from each other and reinvent the wheel again and again. And in addition to collective learning, it behooves us to engage in collective action when the proper defense of our interests calls for it. The purpose of NaCCRA is to serve as a vehicle working to preserve and strengthen the CCRC way of life by empowering those who have invested heavily in it and by facilitating their actions of mutual support. Now, given the vastness of these United States, a key locus of this sharing and teamwork takes place at the state level through such organizations as NaCCRA here in Connecticut, or Orange in New Jersey, or CalCRA in California. But only 9 of our 50 states have similar state associations of CCRC residents. So an organization like NaCCRA is a precious entity deserving your constant and vigorous support. I said that one of the roles of NaCCRA is to avoid having each of these states reinvent the wheel. At the same time, it is important for us to acknowledge that local conditions require specially tailored approaches. I want to mention briefly 3 activities in which NaCCRA is currently engaged and show how they blend this need for shared learning with the need to allow local people to tailor approaches to local conditions. I want to talk about our Model Laws Project briefly. You'll hear about that more tomorrow. Our Bill of Rights Project, and our newsletter Lifeline. One of our main projects at NaCCRA is our Model Laws Project. This is a series of draft laws intended primarily to protect the financial investment which residents have made in their life care communities. The model laws seek to provide the same sort of protections for our investment in our CCRC as the protections enjoyed by insurance policyholders and banking customers. We have deliberately drafted these model laws in segments so that residents in individual states can pick and choose which segment might, perhaps with modifications, be appropriately brought to the attention of their own state legislators. Our Model Laws Project is completed and the material is available at the website address, which you have in an envelope you will find on your table. If you will look on your table, you'll see there's an envelope there, and in it is a page that says how NaCCRA can help you and how you can help NaCCRA, and there are there's contact data for you to get in touch with each of these projects I'm mentioning. Second, we are now working on a model Bill of Rights for CCRC residents. Most of us are familiar with such bills of rights for residents of nursing homes and assisted living facilities. But in general, no such statements of rights exist for people living independently in CCRCs, such as the right to organize residents association, the right for representatives of the residents to meet on a regular basis with members of the governing board of the CCRC, the right of residents to be consulted before the introduction of changes to such things as the meal plan, or before a major facilities expansion is undertaken, and the right of prospective residents to be offered a contract, which is written clearly and understandably in plain English. We need your help in developing this Model Bill of Rights project. There's a draft Model Bill of Rights, but it is yet unfinished. And we would like each of you to organize a group of residents in your CCRC, look at this draft Bill of Rights, and tell us what you think of it. Is it needed? What is missing? Where have we overreached? We need your feedback. So I hope each of you will organize some sort of discussion group in your CCRC about this Model Bill of Rights. Maybe it can be discussed in the Board of Directors of your Residents Association. Maybe you have a current events group that likes to discuss issues. Maybe it just will be an informal group of your neighbors that will come to your house for tea one afternoon and look at this. The important thing is we need your feedback, and we need broad spectrum feedback. We don't want you to take a vote and decide what you like and what you don't like. If one person likes one thing and one person likes another, we want to hear both points of view so we can consider everything as we finalize this document. As you've heard from wonderful Marlene, NaCCRA publishes a newsletter 6 times a year called Lifeline, which keeps residents informed of developments around the nation. The material I have given you provides the web address where you can see back issues of Lifeline. Now, as I indicated, there are still 41 of the 50 states where there are not yet state associations of CCRC residents. Yet many of these states have a considerable number of CCRCs within them. So NaCCRA is their primary link to the wider CCRC world. As the need arises and as the way opens, we will be helping them to form their own state associations, such as you have here in Connecticut. Marketing materials for CCRCs often promise a carefree retirement, and many people, reasonably enough, enter a CCRC assuming that as long as they can pay their conventionally expected bills, their troubles are over. Many providers, I am sure, earnestly and sincerely wish for this to be the case. Unfortunately, economic meltdowns, vacancy rates, and human error indicate that there is really no escape from reality, and that we have to remain alert, even in our senior years. As my colleague Bob Nicholson has mentioned, you have in your material a membership form. Even though I think most people are members of NaCCRA by virtue of being members of CCCRA, I hope you'll consider, as Bob has suggested, becoming an individual member in addition. The reason for this are several. One, the more individual members we have enrolled, the more persuasive we can be with legislators when we're talking with them about things we want to see happen for the benefit of CCRC residents. Secondly, frankly, the dollars your individual membership provides supports our budget, as Joe Walton explained earlier. And third, if you're a member, you can have a direct communication link with NaCCRA. NaCCRA seeks to defend the quality of life and peace of mind that you sought when entering a CCRC. It seeks to serve as your eyes and ears. Please help us do so by becoming an individual member. The 2,000 CCRCs in the USA are like an archipelago scattered across our land. Admittedly, these scattered communities represent a very small element in the vast and populous globalized society which surrounds them. But the mystical poet William Blake asserted that he could see the universe in a grain of sand. And indeed, as we contemplate this archipelago, we see a panorama which is awesome, so long as each element does not remain an island unto itself. We need collective learning and mutual support. We are interdependent, and our interdependence is an image or sign of the mutuality inherent in the creation itself. As pioneer investors in the CCRC idea, we are custodians of something very precious which must be strengthened and preserved for future generations. Let us have great respect for the responsibility we have taken on and great compassion for ourselves and others as we seek to fulfill this responsibility. Things which are noble and beautiful inevitably begin on the scale of a mustard seed. Such a seed, if carefully nurtured, will show us once again that raw human nature, which sometimes can seem so noisy, self-centered, and dangerous, can age into maturity and wisdom. The maturity and wisdom which makes community possible. Indeed, a maturity and wisdom so excellent that it makes visible the fundamental truth of things. Thank you very much. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
In your other life, what was your, I know you had to do with the Quakers.
Yes.
And just what was that?
Well, my educational background is in physics, but I left physics very early and became a Quaker worker. And I worked for the American Friends Service Committee and for Pendle Hill for most of my working life. And I'm a member of a Quaker, Pennswood Village is a Quaker-sponsored CCRC. Are there any questions? Can I answer any questions? Does anyone have any comments? Yes?
You want to comment on the degree that retirement centers, principally sponsored by religious bodies, have also cooperated with HUD and have brought into their communities facilities that allow people with a lower income to occupy satisfactory housing. The Lutherans, I know, have done that in western Pennsylvania, and the Episcopalians have done it in Washington, D.C.
Has everyone heard what Jack Matheson has told us? Very good. Thank you for mentioning that.
In Washington, D.C., it's a maximum of $54,900. You can move into a very satisfactory modified retirement center sponsored by the Episcopal Church.
Excellent. And HUD.
And HUD.
Right. Yes.
I'd like to ask a little bit about the 9 states that are represented in membership.
Right.
And I just want to reflect that having been involved in the Massachusetts organization for several years, it didn't occur to me to even realize that there was a national organization and to join it 2 years ago. Is there a way that you could make available to us in each state the membership from our own state? Because we are trying to rebuild our organization in Massachusetts, and we are without the connections of the earlier people who serve very well, but essentially are gone now from our midst.
That's a very good question. And I think I'd have to talk to the board of directors about that. It's a complicated question. When people give you their name and address, they're very wary about the use you make of the name and address and about spreading it around.
Right.
So that does get to be a complicated question. sometimes what might be possible, and again I have to discuss it with our board of directors, is for us to use our mailing list to invite people to an event that you might run where you can pick up their names voluntarily from them. But one of the most tricky things if you're running a mailing list or a membership list is if people start getting mail from people other than you, and they recognize by a misprint that you're the source of it, you have big public relations problems. So we have to be very careful with mailing lists and with contributor lists and things like that. Yes, here.
I just wanted to clarify for you that NaCCRA members in Connecticut are not automatically members of NaCCRA.
Okay.
We have to encourage each person to join NaCCRA, and we do.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks. Yes, in the
I
back.
came in a little bit late, maybe you heard this, but and you may not know the answer, but of the 2,000 or so CCRCs, do you know how many are faith-based?
Yes, I know roughly, if I can dig it out of my mind. I do know that of all the CCRCs, about 80% are not-for-profit, and of those 80%, about 50% are faith-based. But these are rough figures, but they are available, and we can look it up. Yes.
I was wondering if there's some way that, I think your talk would be a very good, not too long read for our children who are dithering and wondering, and to whom this new experiment is not quite clear, and they have mixed views of how it might be, and you put the past and the future and the whole situation so well. It should be published in something they read.
Sure.
Yeah. Could you repeat that, Dan? We had trouble. I had trouble hearing her over here.
Oh,
I suspect
the
others may
suggestion
have.
was that my talk should be made available to the families of CCRC residents who are often skeptical about, you know, the deal, so to speak.
I see.
And the feeling was that a review of the history and whatnot makes it clear.
The
So
talk will
I'd
be
glad to make it
available. The talk will be available on NaCCRA.
Yeah, it's been videotaped, so people can tune into it. But I'll be glad to provide you with the text also. Yes.
Jack just mentioned NaCCRA. Is there going to be a time where
He's
we
going to speak to that in about
Okay.
not
Yeah.
very many
Perfect.
minutes.
Good. So that's a very, really important thing, and we'll hear more about that. Well, yes?
Can I go back to the question that Jack asked about the relationship of our communities to HUD and bringing in people with
Right. Well, I think Jack is a better expert about that than I am, which is why I kind of ducked and said, everyone here, Jack. I can only really speak about my own experience in the rather small Quaker world, where there is a lot of unease with the price issues of CCRCs, and where friends have begun organizing different kinds of senior options. There's a place called, for example, Friends Homes, a friend's house in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is not a CCRC, but which is sort of like a CCRC, but much less expensive. So there are some experiments, but I'm not really broadly familiar with the field in general. I mean, let's face it, those of us who managed to get into a CCRC are in a sense, I hope I'm not going to offend anyone, we're in a sense escaping from the disarray of the American healthcare system. And in the long run, we really need a better American healthcare system so that every senior citizen has the kind of security that we're enjoying as a CCRC. But it is expensive, and so the only thing that places like Kendall and Pennswood Village, again I'm talking about the small Quaker world, is that we do have generous scholarship programs for the CCRCs, both entry fee assistance programs and monthly fee assistance programs. But, and then some friends are organizing different kinds of life care communities, which are not CCRCs, which tap into HUD resources. But I'm glad Jack brought that up as a big issue that all of us have to be worried about, that we are, in a sense, in a special protected world which is not available to everybody. Well, I don't want to take too much time. If there are no more questions, we'll finish. Thank you.